Welcome aboard.
Please welcome to the stage Axios Pro Health Tech reporter, Erin Brodwin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Brodwin. I'm a health tech reporter with Axios. I'm so excited to have you all here. Thank you for joining us in what is supposed to be sunny San Diego. It's a little foggy out there, but seems okay. The title of today's event is The Prognosis for America's Pain, and I feel like the timing couldn't be more ideal for me personally. I cover health tech from a business perspective, and we just saw the very first digital health company to IPO in many years, and it just so happens to be a digital MSK company. It's called Hinge Health. They provide virtual physical therapy, and I think it'll be, somewhat of a bellwether for the industry. So it's really good timing for us to be here today. I just wanted to say that Axios has been in DC, Axios has been in Miami, and now we are excited to be here for the third event in this series to discuss what's next for the state of pain medicine today, and some common misconceptions around pain management and chronic pain care. We'll cover the advocacy perspective and how providers today are thinking about the challenges in today's treatment landscape. And our first guest, I'm so excited to have with me, is Dr. Beth Darnell from Stanford University School of Medicine. Welcome, Beth. So I was doing my review, as I do for interviews like this, looked into your background a little bit, and there's a lot in there with the term pain psychology. Could you tell us all what the heck pain psychology is?
Absolutely. I am indeed a pain psychologist, and it's a natural fit for psychology to be a part of pain management, because the definition of pain is that it's both a negative sensory and emotional experience. So psychology is actually built into the definition of pain, but that is not widely appreciated. So we really need to treat the whole definition of pain, and that's where psychology comes in. So we target all of these factors that influence the pain experience: a person's thoughts, their emotions, their daily choices. And then we equip individuals with skill sets to better manage the pain, to reduce their own suffering.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, but I have definitely been someone who's experienced pain, and it's, you very much feel the need, I feel like, to say it's not all in my head. This is a physical thing. But tell us more about what aspects of, I think we've talked about like whole person care, and what aspects of incorporating psychology are important in managing, what is also physical pain.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to touch on that one point, because sometimes people will think, well, psychology is part of it. Are you saying that pain is all in my head, or that my pain isn't real? And nothing could be further from the truth. Pain is real, it has a medical basis, it's rooted in the central nervous system. It's just that once we realize that pain is a product of the central nervous system, that's the opportunity for us to come in and directly modulate the central nervous system so that we can gain relief. So it's more of an integrated approach where we become empowered to actually work with mind and body towards relief. We're naturally hardwired to want to escape pain. I'm sure you've had this experience yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? We all want to escape pain. Pain is naturally distressing, and so we're hardwired for that. But we are not born knowing how to modulate pain, like how to live with it. Our bodies know how to escape pain. And when we experience pain and it's distressing, it creates a neurobiological cascade that does prepare us to escape it. So if we're placing our hand on a hot stove, you feel that pain, you get an automatic cascade. It prepares you to escape it. It's very effective. But Erin, you have ongoing pain of some type. Let's say it's foot pain, hip pain. You have a diagnosis, fibromyalgia, migraines. You can't just run away from that pain. You can't just escape something that's coming from inside of you. And yet that neurobiological cascade is imploring you to. And so it's this disconnect between how our neurobiology is preparing us and our capacity in the moment. And all that simply requires is that we apply skill sets to be able to calm the central nervous system and then move ourselves towards relief. So it's really one of the best examples, I think, of a deep need for education and skills so that we can better control our experience.
Yeah, I think all of us in this room are probably familiar with something called the opioid epidemic. We talk a lot about medicines used to treat pain, but it sounds like you're talking about something that doesn't actually involve just medicine or possibly medicine at all. What can you tell us more about? I've heard this concept, the over-medicalization of pain. What's your take on that? What's your approach to that?
Yeah, so, as I mentioned, pain is this comprehensive experience that involves both that sensory input that we feel, but it's also how we're conceptualizing that as an individual, what's going on in our mind. And so it's influenced by our thoughts, it's influenced by our emotions, it's even influenced by things like genetics and our history and trauma, all of these factors, and that's what makes pain such an individual experience. And so what we need to do is truly characterize the whole person that is having pain to identify their unique targets to be able to gain relief. If we don't do that, if we just apply a very reductive approach, here's this one medication, they try the medication, it doesn't work well, let's increase the dose of that medication. Let's keep doing more of the same thing that isn't working very well. That's what leads to over-medicalization. People don't need more of the same thing that isn't working. They need a different approach that includes the whole person, a holistic approach. And especially, we need the lowest risk treatments applied first. These treatments that basically help people gain their own skills, their own ability to better regulate their central nervous system towards relief.
Yeah, do you think there's a place where opioids can fit into that safely, or would you just say opioids generally are bad?
Absolutely, there's a place for opioids. I mean, for some people, those are essential. I think what we can agree is that in the United States and even in other countries, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, they were often used as a first-line treatment when we don't want to use them as first-line treatments. But for some people, they can be really important. I think that one of the things that needs to be appreciated is that now, people living in rural areas, we don't have enough trained psychologists or other clinicians to apply these conservative approaches. So in these areas, for a lot of patients, and insurance will only cover medications, and so doctors are left with few choices. This sort of backs people into riskier options because we haven't made some of these better options available.
Yeah. So I'm a business reporter. I said at the outset I was talking about a company called Hinge Health. You also happen to be the chief science officer of a company in the pain management space called Applied VR. Can you tell us how Applied VR sees itself in this landscape, where it fits in? How does it compare to a Hinge Health, for example?
Yeah, so Applied VR is a virtual reality therapeutics company. And so basically it's using virtual reality, 3D immersive technology. And what we do is we've married this virtual reality technology with this basic pain management skills. And so a person can put on a headset and they enter an immersive world, and there we're able to teach people how to regulate the central nervous system using visual displays, there's auditory input, there's biofeedback technology that occurs through a respiratory sensor, And so people can experience, they're guided into relaxation in some of these modules, and then also that 3D immersive experience enhances the learning. So people can learn more quickly, more deeply, acquire these skills through these modules, and then that leads to lasting relief even outside of the headset, because that's always the goal. We want people to experience a treatment, but ultimately gain lasting relief. So with virtual reality, with the Reliever device, we've developed a proprietary program. It's 56 days in length, and it's 3 to 6 minutes a day that a person uses the headset. And there's content that matches on to various themes so that people gain that comprehensive skill set for pain management.
Yeah, so it's 2 months.
Yep.
A few minutes a day. Doesn't
Correct.
sound like a ton, but there's also people who definitely wouldn't adhere to that or don't have the ability to, don't have the time to. Are there other approaches that don't involve, such a high degree of technology? Are there other approaches that you've seen that can be more widely applied to like a large audience setting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nice thing about the virtual reality is you can just get a headset sent to your home and you can use it at home. But we also have other low-tech interventions that are scalable, that are really breaking barriers where, I started off by saying we don't have enough trained clinicians. We have 100 million Americans who are living with ongoing pain of some type, and we don't have enough clinicians to apply these low-risk approaches. So in response to that, I developed an intervention called Empowered Relief, which is one session intervention, and it rapidly equips individuals with effective pain relief skills. So it basically takes what normally is accomplished with, say, 16 hours of cognitive behavioral therapy or some of these other evidence-based treatments, and we compress it down to a single session. Because I knew as a psychologist that very few people could come back for multiple sessions, but most people could attend one. And now we offer it online, and different types of providers can deliver empowered relief, and it allows for large class sizes. So we can have 100 people in a single 2-hour class can be treated. And that intervention involves education about the central nervous system, what you can do to manage pain. People learn 3 core pain management skills. They complete a personalized plan for empowered relief, and then they download a free binaural audio app, which gives them a tool to continuously calm the nervous system over time.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask because, one class sounds like the benefits couldn't possibly be super long lasting. You go one time, how do you remember these things? How do people follow up? What are the types of techniques you teach people in this one class that they can kind of take home and repeat?
Yeah, so in the personalized plan, people basically self-identify what are their targets and which skills do they want to apply to that target. Very central to the intervention is calming the central nervous system, because pain registers as a threat to our safety. I mentioned that at the beginning. When we calm the central nervous system, that communicates safety. It communicates wellness. It is the foundation by which we are able to establish comfort, healing, and wellness. And it's not well appreciated in our very fast-paced society, but especially once we have a medical condition, and especially once we have ongoing pain, it is absolutely essential that we continuously communicate safety to our central nervous system. That actually dampens pain processing in the brain.
How so?
And that, because it's incompatible. So basically, pain itself is experienced by us as being distressing. And so our attention is going to be drawn to it. Our muscles, that neurobiological cascade, we literally brace against it. We move without even knowing, this is subtle, but our brain and body move into a defensive positioning when we experience pain. So you may notice a contraction in your muscles. Our mind is attuned to it. We can become vigilant for it. We can change how our body is moving. Our heart rate increases, our respiratory rate increases, our blood vessels constrict. This is all automatic, and it's in response to pain. Now, If we calm the central nervous system, we move ourselves into an incompatible state. The mind is calmed, the muscles relax. Our mind and body move into that state of safety. And when we do this regularly over time, that's what steers our neurobiology towards relief. So there's different ways we can do that. We can do that by learning these skills in the VR headset. We can learn it through empowered relief. But what's most critical is that we apply these skills regularly, because you're not going to do it just once and suddenly be cured. We're retraining mind and body away from pain, and that's what's crucial.
Yeah, as you were talking through that, I could feel myself, like I was in this very tense interview, and I felt myself kind of relax, and that was really nice. But again, yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like I wouldn't have the ability to continuously come back to. I know that you have an example prepared for us of a way to walk through some of that.
Yes.
Could we do that with the audience? Could I ask you all to just silence your phones for the next, couple of minutes? It'll only take a little bit.
Are you guys up for it?
Are we? Okay, cool.
Okay, great. So what I am going to do is I'm going to invite everybody to close your eyes if you're comfortable. If you're not comfortable closing your eyes, you can just pick something to focus on, but then soften your gaze. What we want to do is turn our attention inward and begin focusing on our breath. And as you begin focusing on your breath, invite your breath to slow, to soften, and to deepen. And you may place the palm of one of your hands on your lower belly as you breathe. And just imagine that you're drawing each breath down into the palm of your hand. So you may begin to feel a subtle rising and falling in your lower belly as you breathe gently, soothingly. If any thoughts into your mind, just allow those thoughts to gently drift away as you guide your awareness back to your breath. Breathing gently, soothingly. Allowing yourself to sink into the rhythm of your breath and allowing yourself to be nurtured and nourished by your breath. Letting any thoughts just gently drift away like clouds in the sky as you bring your awareness back to your breath. Good. And just imagine as you breathe gently that you're expanding your breath further. Imagine that you're expanding your breath into your legs and into your feet. Imagine that you are expanding your breath into your arms and into your hands. Imagine that you are expanding your breath into your head and into your brain. Imagine that you are expanding your breath into your skin. Imagine that you are expanding your breath just beyond the edges of your body. Breathing slowly, gently, easily. observing how your body responds to the slowing of your breath. And observing now how your mind responds to the slowing of your breath. Knowing that you can bring yourself back to this place of soothing relaxation anytime you choose, simply by slowing and deepening your breath. Observing any feelings of peace and calm and well-being now. Just allowing yourself to keep with you those senses of well-being and peacefulness as you begin to notice your place in this room, in this space, taking a few more slow, deep breaths. Whenever you feel ready, go ahead and open your eyes.
How are we feeling? I feel like that was great. Now, my only takeaway question for you is, how do I get myself to do that every day?
Okay, take Empowered Relief, download the app, and you can do it every single day in a guided fashion. There's other ways. You can access audio files online as well. Some people are really good with self-calming, but you just experience the calming of the central nervous system, and this is medicinal for health and for pain management.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That was incredible. I don't want to speak for our audience, but I think we all needed that. So thank you for sharing. Now, I am going to ask you all to just stay right here as we transition to our next speaker. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Donal. Thanks.
Introducing our View from the Top moderator, Hope King.
Good morning, everybody. It is so great to be here in beautiful San Diego. I am just thrilled to be in California. Honestly, it is still the best coast, even though I'm from New York. Don't tell anyone I said that. This is our third event in the Prognosis of Pain Management series, and we are so fortunate to work with great partners who make these events possible. This morning's event is possible in part to our amazing partner, Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Thank you, Vertex Pharmaceuticals, for making it possible that we could cover the issue of pain management today. Without further ado, I'd like to kick off our View from the Top conversation with our next guest, Paul Negulescu, Senior Vice President and Disease Area Executive of Pain at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Good to be with you.
I'm very relaxed.
I was just going to say, I feel like I was coming in with a different energy, but after that, I like group meditation.
Let's just breathe for 10 minutes.
Okay. You want to just do that? Want to continue the last segment? Well, I do want to really get to why Vertex is here today and what do we want to talk about in terms of pain management.
Well, we're here today to help raise awareness about pain and unmet needs in pain. In particular, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about acute pain. There's obviously a lot of chronic pain in the world as well. We heard about that. We're going to hear more about that from some of the other speakers. But acute pain is also a situation that affects many people. 80 million people every year in the US are prescribed a medication for their acute pain. And of those, approximately 40 million will receive an opioid as part of that prescription. And based on that experience, approximately 80,000 each year will go on to some form of opioid use disorder. So acute pain is a gateway for many people to become addicted, and it's also an unsatisfying experience for many people. So we ended up doing a survey to understand better how people felt about their acute pain experience, and we're going to share some of that this morning.
Tell us about some of the key findings.
So a few things. First, while many of us may consider acute pain as something that starts quickly and ends quickly, it actually doesn't go away as quickly as we think. The people in the survey, and we surveyed 1,000 people who had had an acute pain experience within the last year, as well as 500 clinicians and caregivers who had treated pain in the previous month. They reported that, on average, people with acute pain missed 2 weeks of work, 19 days to be exact. So it was a big impact on their lives. The other thing that we learned from this survey is that many people had an unsatisfactory experience with their pain management, even with the presence of opioids, which can be very effective to treat pain but have the side effects. So people reported that they just didn't have a good experience, and the next time that they experience acute pain, they would like something different than their previous experience. And this was commonly reported from both patients and clinicians.
What are some other challenges, key challenges, in the acute pain management landscape?
Probably the biggest challenge is that we don't have enough options to treat the pain. There hasn't been a new class of medications to treat acute pain, or chronic pain for that matter, in over 20 years. So while there's a lot of good work going on to try to reduce the reliance on opioids, we simply don't have a lot of options. We have ibuprofen, acetaminophen as medications, and not much else. You have to kind of go to the opioids if those aren't enough.
Any other challenges that Vertex is working on?
I think the other challenge is just access sometimes to these new medications. When they do come along, that can take a while. And part of the reason to have some of these discussions in the various cities that we're going to, and this is the third city, is to raise awareness that patients need to ask their physicians. They need to talk to their physicians about their pain management plan. We learned from the survey that many patients are hesitant to talk about pain, and we're trying to make sure through these discussions and others that people feel more empowered to have those discussions.
And why is it important to focus on pain management right now?
Well, it's sort of like planting a tree. Yesterday would have been a better day than today, but today is a good day because there's a great awareness that pain management is inadequate and that we need better approaches, whether they're medical or non-medical approaches. And it seems like something that everyone can agree on, whether it's a patient, a physician, it doesn't matter where you are in the ecosystem. This is something that we can all work on together. And I think there will be new approaches coming soon that will give people new options.
And as you mentioned, this is the third, and we're in San Diego.
It's actually raining today. You said it was beautiful, but just for those,
because I want them to feel like they're missing out. FOMO, that's what gets people to tune in, right? And you have joined us for many of these conversations. And for Vertex, this discussion about pain management is incredibly critical. And I also just feel like there's probably a call to action in each of these. So what is your call to action for those listening today, in the room today, watching? First of all, thank you for your interest in the topic of pain. It's a shared experience we all have. And I guess the call to action is take that interest into your daily lives, take it into the groups of people you talk to. You must be here for a reason, that pain is important to you. Let's all move forward together and figure out how we can together manage pain better. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today? I'm very optimistic that we can bend this curve of the opioid epidemic, and that science is coming along quickly now in different approaches, both medical and non-medical, to treat pain better. Thank you, Paul, so much for joining us and for sponsoring today's amazing event. We still have some great conversations left, so stay tuned. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Hope.
please give it up for Axios senior healthcare reporter, Tina Reed.
Hello, everyone. I am also very excited to be here in San Diego. I think this town is beautiful. I am the co-writer of our Vitals newsletter at Axios. If you have not yet subscribed, you can do so on axios.com. I'm very excited for our next conversation. Please help me in welcoming our next guest, U.S. Pain Foundation's Tom Norris. Thank you so much. Sorry. Thank you so much for being here, Tom.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Such a great conversation already. I wanted to start by pointing out you're an advocate, you're also a patient, and I think that's really super important to ground our conversation and having that patient perspective, because so often we can talk about healthcare and kind of forget why we're all here, right? Mm-hmm. Can you start off by talking a little bit about how you ended up in this space as a patient? Talk about your experience with pain.
Sure. I didn't ask for this, but I started my journey on advocacy when I was diagnosed with and treated with testicular cancer. Subsequent to that, I found out that we're not set up to address chronic pain. None of the doctors knew what was going on, both the military, excuse me, and the civilians. It's a really scattered process. So I was lucky enough to encounter the American Chronic Pain Association, where I learned to facilitate support groups. Subsequent to that, I started facilitating support groups, and I've done so for about 27 years. I realized that I need to work on patient empowerment, which is meaning putting the patient in the driver's seat with enough knowledge to be able to move forward in managing the pain. But also, there's a point where the patient voice is not heard in research and what the treatments. And I really believe that the patient should be the focus. It's important that the patient's voice be heard when you're developing guidelines or doing research, so the treatment and anything else associated with the treatment are focused on what an individual is going through.
There's actually an acronym you actually use, PWLE.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Person with lived experience. Now, the word patient and PWLE seem to be used interchangeably. I use PWLE when I talk about people outside the doctor's office. A doctor, somebody in the doctor's office is really a patient. But PWLE is more expansive in that it can also include the support mechanism, the families, the caregivers, anybody who draws experience from somebody's dealing with chronic pain.
Now, I want to get into the patient empowerment piece, but I wanted to come back to that lived experience you had. What was it like for you as a patient when you said that it took you a while to even find people or groups that could help you navigate that space? But what were you experiencing in terms of challenges finding pain relief or support? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, if I had to use one word, I would be frustration. I'd also associate anger, confusion. It just really seemed like the whole medical system was not, as I said before, not prepared. They wouldn't even accept. There were people, the doctors that I ran into would not even accept that my pain was real. They said, "Oh, it's all in your head," and they weren't listening to me. And you know, that is a common experience with people with chronic pain. The people I talk to weekly, you know, can't find a doctor who will really take what they're going through to heart. I mean, the doctors are focused on the symptoms of pain rather than looking at the whole body, which is, you know, follow up with what Beth said. And we need to look at a holistic, patient-centered treatment of chronic pain. Does that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Okay.
And so you said one of your biggest goals is making sure that patient voice is really reflected in research. What does that look like?
Well, I may be jumping ahead here, but if you look at say, the CDC guidelines for opioid prescription. They were developed in 2016, I believe. Basically, it was intended to control opioid use and the overuse of opioids. Up to that point, we were giving opioids away like candy. It was a standard procedure, standard prescription for people, doctors to give people. Let's control it, whatever. Now, as an aside, I was on fentanyl for 10 years. So I'm part of that opioid pandemic or epidemic. When they came up with those guidelines, they had lots of doctors who provided input, but there was nobody from the patient perspective who was able to make a difference in what those guidelines were. And they asked for, as in with guideline procedures, they asked for public input after they had written the article or the guidelines. But I believe they failed to appreciate, they failed to integrate any patient perspectives. As a result, we wound up with abrupt cessation of opioid prescriptions. Everybody took this as law, and everybody said, I'm not going to risk losing my practice. So they stopped it. And so you wound up with people who had no medications. They wound up with psychological problems, and even people committed suicide. So people were hurt by a development of guideline where they had no voice. And that kind of riles me. Now, to go in history, those were created in 2016. In 2019, the FDA put out a notice about the abrupt cessation of opioids and all the problems associated. The CDC updated those guidelines in 2022, I believe, where they actually listened to people, at least a little bit. So it's progress. I'm one of these people who say, okay, this is half full. So they made progress. And they revised those guidelines where they agreed that there are people who need opioids, and that it addressed alternatives to opioids.
But even this week, there was an op-ed in USA Today this week that spoke about so-called pain refugees who are searching for doctors to accept new patients. They're desperate for relief, and they're having trouble finding somebody who will actually prescribe opioids when they do need them. So this is a problem that still needs addressing?
Always. The people I talk to on a weekly basis, with the various support groups that I have, it's a common problem. They just can't find anything that works for them. So there are people who need opioids because we haven't done the research enough to be able to find a non-opioid therapy that works as well as opioids.
Going back to another issue that you find very important is getting the patient voice involved in clinical trials. Why is that so important?
Well, I'd have to explain a circuit. I think that the patient voice needs to be heard in clinical trials because clinical trials need to be focused on what actually works for a patient. The researchers are doing great work, but they need the patient input to focus things on real life. So you've got clinical trials. If we can improve them, those are used to create guidelines, which are recommended therapies. And those are taken by insurance companies and doctors, but insurance companies, let's talk about first. And insurance company says, okay, these are best practices, so we will cover these. So without the input, you don't have good therapies, and then you don't have insurance coverage.
All the way.
And it goes around and around. And really for me, I focus on making sure everybody with chronic pain that I talk to realizes that they have a power that's within them to have their voice heard. And I think that's really the basis of it. And when they get to the point where they can manage pain, because I don't think yet that we can stop chronic pain. We can learn to manage it. And to echo what Beth said earlier, there are procedures or techniques for managing the pain, but you've got to get to that point. First of all, you're dealing with pain, and then you have to say, okay, I'm managing it. And then you can become an advocate. And an advocate needs to be able to say, I want my voice heard and make a difference. And I think that's important. And, I look at people who are in the depths of chronic pain who think they have no power. And it frustrates the what out of me, because we have a voice. And medicine is meant to improve our lives. We're meant to be partners with doctors, therapists, and what have you. So we need to get to that point where we can take action, be an advocate, and move on.
Can you give a specific example where the patient voice was involved in a clinical trial and it made the difference?
Yeah, it's what you're seeing now isn't like on a spectrum where we're moving in that direction where patients are integrated. The prime example is PCORI, which is patient-centered results, PCO, oriented results, response, whatever it is, Institute. PCORI demands patient involvement from the get-go. I mean, evaluations to critiques and what have you. The NIH is following suit, which is nice to see. And CMDR-P, which is congressionally mandated, congressionally directed medical research program, are all getting on board where they go, okay, let's have a patient involved from the get-go.
And what I find interesting about them is they also say at the end, we give them a result. We tell them what happened.
Yeah, and it winds up being a loop. I mean, if you look at the process for clinical trials, you start out with the research proposal and you go to the implementation. And the implementation, to me, is where it really hits the road. I mean, it's people need to know what works for a resolution, for resolving their problems. And I've been involved with PCORI and CDMRP and every organization I can to get clinical trials to be more effective for people.
Yeah. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're watching next. As somebody who is very steeped in this space, what are you watching as a patient in innovation and pain management?
First of all, I would say the main thing I'm looking for is patient involvement. I mean, most people with pain, and this is overgeneralization, don't feel worthy. They have a problem, and they're stuck in that problem. But, I go, you've got to be able to look. You've got to be able to advocate. When it comes down to what I see coming down the road, is patients being integrated into the clinical trial process more and more. I'm looking at improvement of devices and procedures, whether it's just participating in trials, looking at let's see if I can give you an example. Sorry, I got stuck here. You're looking at being able to define pain, participate in pain research. You're looking at procedures coming down the road that are integrated or focused on returning an individual to productivity. Mm-hmm. You're looking at more wearable devices to be able to say, okay, this is a pain I've got, this is how I can deal with it. Medically, I think we're looking at focusing on the activity, moderating the activity, being able to manage the pain daily. Most people surrender to pain, and I personally feel like it's a challenge. And I'm hoping that more people look at it as a challenge, that there's help available, whether it's wearable devices, whether it's new medications or new way of looking things, or being involved in the medical, what's going on medically. Does that really answer your question?
Have you tried any of these any of the VR or the wearables?
I think it's one of the things I need to talk about or address is I'm a firm believer in VR. Virtual reality has enabled me to be able to do the things I do.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm aware of what I've got and what I'm dealing with when it comes to chronic pain. And trust me, I spent 10 years in bed, unable to do anything. But I found virtual reality, and it enabled me to focus on what I can do. Whether it's, dealing with the pain, putting the pain over here is what I call it. Virtual reality, and I'm a firm believer in the product that Beth and her company have put forward. And I've used Applied VR's headset.
That's very cool.
It works for me.
Yeah.
And then that's what everybody has to realize. Everybody's pain is different. And you have to find something that works for you. And I am very, very lucky that I go down the list of things that work for me is prayer comes first, the support of my wife comes second, Applied VR and being able to use the headset and all that entails works for me. And then, in real emergencies, I use epidurals. I have a set. I know exactly what to do when that ugly lion raises his head. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Very much so. And that seems like a great place to wrap up our conversation, this idea that everybody has to find their own solution. So
yeah, it would be nice if we could all, have one thing.
Yeah.
But pain is individual. It's, what may be a 10 for me may be a 0 for somebody else using the scale. So we all have to find our path. And what I see us doing is opening up that for people. The recognition that everybody's different, everybody's pain is different. What works for somebody may not work for somebody else. But we need to move forward and open up the field of therapies, open up the thing of what works or how to deal with it. I'm not a big believer in pain medicines. There is a place. In my particular example, I haven't taken pain medication in 20 years.
Wow.
I think that's right, 20 years. It's all for me, it's what I've learned from Applied VR, to use a little PR there. I've used that headset, I've used the procedures, I manage the pain. And I think that's the key. You can't cure it, but you can work with it. And therein lies my advocacy work. It's the old thing of, what can I do to help? But the work is up to you.
Well, Tom, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
I love it. I thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did we cover it?
Yep. You got it. Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Appreciate it. I'm going to stay up here and don't go anywhere because we do have one more great conversation coming up for our final conversation. We're going to speak to a local leader whose research is focused on identifying the neurobiological mechanisms supporting the modulation and cultivation of empathy and compassion. Say that 5 times fast. Please welcome to the stage the director of the Brain Mechanisms of Pain and Health Lab at UC San Diego, Dr. Fidel Zidan. Hi, thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation today. I have learned so much. How many of you thought we were going to come in today talking so much about how pain is in the mind, it's in the brain? Anybody? I have been really surprised by our conversations today, and I think it's really interesting, and I think you're going to have some really interesting thoughts on that.
Manage your expectations.
Okay, great. Well, I want to return to a conversation that Beth and Aaron were having earlier.
Sure.
When it was so many patients feel like they're being told that their pain is in their mind and in a dismissive way. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean or how you see the role that the mind and the brain plays in pain and how you address it?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, it's not in their mind. If someone says that they're suffering from pain, we should believe them. That's the primary indicator of pain, is a subjective report of pain. But pain itself has to be processed in the brain. There's a process called nociception, which is the information that the body produces to facilitate the experience of pain. And that goes from our body to the spinal cord and then all the way up to the brain. And what we're seeing is that we can actually modulate the way that the mind and the brain, I mean, the brain's the organ of the mind, right, can evaluate and experience that nociception, that aberrant signaling, as Beth said, that was saying, hey, this is how we survive. We don't go to the hospital unless we're in pain. So it's an evolutionary byproduct that helps us survive. But what happens when it goes haywire? What happens when that signaling goes haywire? And that's what we just heard from Tom, is just, it can be catastrophic and you can't see it. So you really need to believe what your patients are saying.
Actually, that seems to go into another question that I had. You have an interesting other title. You are the inaugural endowed professor of UC San Diego Sanford Institute for Empathy and Compassion. What do empathy and compassion have to do with pain management?
I was hoping you would tell me that. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so we study in another part of my lab the neural mechanisms that support the cultivation of empathy and compassion. And what we have done also in the context of pain is that we can actually study empathy by studying pain. So if you imagine seeing a child on the street that's crying, hungry, hurt, we have this natural inclination, unless you're psychopathological, to feel that to extend empathy and to want to alleviate suffering for that child. So in our laboratory, we evoke pain so that we can understand empathy and what's happening in the brain and in the body.
Very interesting.
In the context of pain modulation, it's really critical to become empathetic to yourself, to be accepting of the pain that arises, to be loving to oneself, because so many people that suffer from chronic pain blame themselves. Their physicians are telling them that drug X, Y, Z should make them feel better, but they don't. And so they forget how to love themselves and to be patient with themselves to eventually go through the patient process to get rid of their pain.
Well, I want to move into some really interesting clinical work that you're doing, or clinical trials you're doing. You are trying to help patients who are suffering from phantom limb pain. Can you tell us about these patients? What are they going through?
Yeah. Phantom limb pain is pain that arises from folks that have amputations from a limb that doesn't exist. Physiologically speaking, it doesn't make sense. There should be some kind of input coming into the brain from that limb, but it doesn't exist, which suggests that there's something more traumatic, psychologically, as we'd call centrally mediated. And it's treatment resistant. There is no cure for phantom limb pain, and it affects a lot of people. And it's one of the most enigmatic conditions there is in the context of chronic pain. So in our laboratory, we are running a placebo-controlled, randomized clinical trial assessing the effects of a high dose of psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, on phantom limb pain as compared to placebo.
That is really interesting. How do you even run a trial using psychedelics?
Very carefully. So we had to go through, about 6 years of getting approvals from our ethics, our FDA, and we recruit our patients. We make sure that they're safe. We do physical examination, blood work, urinalysis, a psychiatric evaluation. We make sure that they're relatively safe to do this work. And then they are prepped with our therapists, 2 therapists that are psychedelic-informed therapists, for 3 days. And then they self-administer a dose in my laboratory in our clinic, very high dose. And it's about 6 hours with the monitor supervision. And then afterwards, there's a day of what we call integration, where we discuss what transpired, and then we scan them again. I didn't tell you that. We scan their brains. We do a bunch of pain testing, a lot of psychological assessments. And we just got the results, and they're absolutely mind-bending, no pun intended.
What does this look like? Like, what does the actual lab look like, where you're giving them this?
Yeah, so it looks like a clinical room at a hospital.
And I think we actually have a picture we can show people.
And it's two beds that we then put together, and we drape the walls, and we bring in music, and it kind of looks like the parking lot of a Grateful Dead show. But it's really comfortable. Yeah, that's what it looks like. If you can see the two beds right there. And that's where they sit and process the experience. And it's cozy. And what's really surprising is that our patients said that they wouldn't have done this if it wasn't under the auspice, the umbrella of clinical supervision, which was surprising because, I wouldn't want to do it inside.
Okay, so and how do you create controls for this? And can you talk about a little bit more about what you actually found in the difference between the controls and the people who are getting these psychedelics?
Sure. So the control we used in this experiment wasn't perfect per se, but it's a high dose of, or actually 100 milligrams of niacin, which you can get at any pharmacy. It's a derivative of vitamin B3, and it creates this flushing feeling, a feeling of relaxation. It can actually make your palms a little bit sweaty. So it does induce a change in your psychological state without eliciting a psychedelic experience. And so after about an hour or so, they know that they probably didn't get the psilocybin. Although one of our patients, when we asked them, hey, do you know if you got niacin or psilocybin? He said, no, I don't know because I've never taken niacin, but if that was niacin, I'm on my way to the CVS pharmacy right now. And the results were really amazing. It's a small sample size. 5 got dosed with psilocybin, 4 with niacin. This was the first ever clinical trial on the effects of psychedelics for chronic pain. And we found dramatic reductions in phantom limb pain, as well as what's called residual limb pain, which is stump pain, the pain that emanates from the periphery, in the order of about 75%. And what was really fascinating is that the effects of the phantom limb pain got stronger further out after the dose, where this is 1 day pain, one day after the dose pain, 1 week, 2 weeks, and then 4 weeks, versus the niacin group, they kind of just went back up after the 4 weeks.
So you're finding it's a durable result.
Yeah, and unfortunately we stopped testing after 1 month.
And so you're going to continue testing this in another...
Yeah, we have a small pot of money to continue with a longer follow-up with a larger sample size.
Great. You also work with cannabis a bit as well. Can you talk a little bit about your work in that space?
Yeah, thank you. So we have 2 clinical trials that are one's ongoing, one's about to start. One is with a formulation of cannabis from a company, biopharmaceutical research company. And this is a formulation of cannabis that doesn't get you high. And we're assessing the effects of this product on a very horrible pain condition called complex regional pain syndrome. And we're going to scan their brains and look at their pain ratings. And then the other study is using a vaporized cannabis. It's just flower plant, and will evoke pain in patients living with chronic low back pain. And we'll scan their brains while they're under. This does get you very high, and it's placebo controlled. So we have a flower that doesn't actually have any THC in it, which is the active ingredient in cannabis. And we'll evoke pain in these patients and scan their brains while they're under the influence and not.
What do you expect to find with that?
Well, our pilot data were really encouraging. We found dramatic reductions in chronic pain after just while they were experiencing the cannabis, and we found brain regions that were really remarkably consistent with activation of our endogenous endocannabinoid system. So our system, we have a system that innately binds with cannabis, with CB1 and CB2 receptors. The idea here is patients get a lot of pain flares. So if you have chronic low back pain and you try to tie your shoes, you can really ruin your whole day. But there's nothing really out there that can be used to immediately and directly reduce one's pain. So the idea is, can you use cannabis to stop those flares, and then with that inhibition of the flares, then attenuate the, I guess, chronification of pain?
So how does your work in cannabis, in psychedelics, I know you work in mindfulness, how does that kind of work within the context of our current, dichotomy of pain management, where we're also using nerve blocks, we're using opioids, we're using non-opioids? I mean, how does that all sort of work together?
It doesn't. It's a great question. They're different. I think the idea is to use more of an integrative approach that is non-addictive and effective in the long run. The idea is to treat the person, the whole person, their relationship with their chronic pain, not only the pain itself, but the relationship a patient with chronic pain has developed with that pain. It's psychological, it's social, it's cultural, and it's very personal. So these products have been used for thousands of years, but we've had rules and regulations that have inhibited not only the use of these products, but the research that goes into seeing if they're validated, if they're actually reliable, how they work, if they work. So while these are, quite frankly, ancient techniques, we're only now starting to use innovative approaches to understand if and how they work.
What's your expectation going forward in terms of how they'll be embraced? I mean, we have a new administration, and it seems like the Republicans, like the GOP, have actually embraced psychedelics in recent years. So I'm curious, do you see any hurdles ahead for funding, or actually a smoother path?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a couple of hurdles. We're currently
Yeah.
we're currently frozen.
There's a lot of context here that I just skipped right over.
Well, we don't have any. Our NIH funds are currently frozen.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's a hurdle.
Yeah. Just a little bit, yeah.
Having said that, we did hear some rumors that they are interested in using these natural products like psychedelics to understand chronic pain.
Yeah.
So that's exciting, The idea is that if we can illustrate evidence that's reproducible, rigorous, with the highest of standards, that policy would then change. That's the way we've moved. I mean, that's the logic, right? That's the rationale. But we really need funds to be able to carry out the work. It's not cheap. As I said, the psilocybin project took about 6 years for us to launch, and same with cannabis. And so we had to jump through a lot of hurdles to make that happen. But so far, the results that we're seeing are really just impressive. And we just got to keep doing the work just to see, if it sticks, if you will.
Really interesting stuff to watch. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time for that.
Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience. Thank you to our audience for being here today and giving us a chance to give you some information that makes you smarter faster. Again, you can check out Axios.com to subscribe to our Vitals newsletter. We hope to see you again soon.